Good evening. We are here, and once again, it is our great pleasure to be in your reality. And so here we are once again in the moon of May. The sun is in the sign of Taurus. The moon once again is in the sign of Gemini. We are Pleiadians from the star system. The Pleiades located at 28 degrees Taurus on what some call the back of the bull. Yes, the back of the bull. You get to the front of the bull and you get to the brightest star in our system, Aldebaran. And as we've reminded you time and again, there are multiple meanings to all of reality. It is coded, it is rich, it's symbolic, and it exists with consciousness on many levels. So, we welcome you all from all around the world, and we are here with our guest, Mr. Khan, who's already moving papers and shuffling things around. And so our vehicle just did a gonging. The energy is sweet, to say the least. Again, the moon is in the late degrees of Gemini. Always a good time to share conviviality, social situations, and information. And so we are here to continue with what we would call part 2 of a series. We'll see how far it goes. That we began, we believe, right around Christmas Day of 2023, or on Christmas Day. It is called The Holy Land. And ideally you have listened to it. We've had some of our students say they've listened again and again and again. That is good. Our information sometimes is deep, sometimes it is winding around, and sometimes it's full of jokes and silliness, but there's always a purpose to all that we do and how we do it. Sometimes after we deliver some full meals of Saturnian information and knowledge, you need to be frivolous, you need a recess, you need to have some pigeon jokes and such, because when you laugh, once again, there is a process that happens in the body, especially if it's good, silly laughter. You want silly, good humor that just sort of puts the magnifying glass on some of the absurdities in which you live. So this will be the Holy Land Part 2. And last time we did this a few months ago, we suggested that there were many places called the Holy Land. They were also called the Navel. The Omphalos was the name in Greek. And you go to other places around the planet, and you led into old monasteries and cathedrals and ancient ruins. And there is inevitably a place that is called the Holy of Holies. And so the idea that in modern times you have a land now called Jerusalem, whose original name was Salam. That was the original name way back. Salam. And eventually it became Jerusalem, as some people say it, but we refer to it as Jerusalem. We will proceed to give a little background more about this concept of the Holy Land, and then Mr. Khan is well prepared to query with us and to prompt us, give us some subjects that may be worthy of discussion, one of which we know is waiting in the wings there. It's the Ark of the Covenant. And of course, according to ancient times, this is a very important artifact. There's been all manner of searching for such things as other artifacts that have slipped under the consciousness of humankind, and You may have heard about them, but perhaps they have not survived, or perhaps they were taken back into the heavens. Because again, we like to remind you that you are dealing with now, basically, if we could sum it up, about the Holy Lands and all that is unfolding, people, friends, far and wide. Your planet Earth, also called Ki, K-I, Ki, your planet Earth has long been fought over. It's long been part of interspecies, intergalactic commerce, travel, trade. Your planet, according to some of your researchers, is 5+ billion years old. In terms of money, $5 billion. Your government probably spends that in 5 minutes every day, maybe every minute. But 5 billion years, you think in terms of the passage of time, a lot can happen in a few hundred years. So stretch your mind, all of you, to begin to consider a timeline of 5 billion years. Now, we are not going to fill it up with markers and what happens and all of this, but we want you to understand the last 500,000 years. That's only 500,000. And then to just make a leap in your imagination of what happened to the other 400.5 billion or whatever it is. There's a lot of happenings on Earth, a lot of important events. And one of the most important events that would characterize the current era is that you are living in a time that we would call the return of the gods. And things break down when you're on the precipice of very large change. We've often covered the astrological highlights and lowlights, and a way that you can map the heavens and understand that these gods of old, gods with a little g, we've spoken about them in all of our writings and publications and recordings and such. But you are now in a very, very deeply immersed period. And this is why the area of Ursalam, Jerusalem, and the surrounding basic crescent, the Middle East crescent there, the crescent of civilization. It went into Egypt, it went into Mesopotamia, and it moved over to India in the Indus Valley. At least this is a vista. It's part of what happened, but if you think about how big history is and how easy it is for someone to edit, erase, eradicate, destroy, or for things to get lost. You had the libraries of Alexandria. They were a repository, a tremendous amount of data from the ancient world. They ended up in the sea, in the Mediterranean, pillaged and all manner of script and depictions of what happened of long ago. Gone. And we dare say that perhaps 100 years, 500 years, and certainly 1,000 years from now, your era will perhaps have some shadow or echo of itself. But the details that each of you are learning and that you know, they are for your consciousness. They will not necessarily leave records. So because there are factions, artifacts, and such that give a picture of what happened of long ago, the people who are in the position to be privy to such knowledge, they hoard it. They think they are a privileged group. Long ago, a very privileged group was established to be the keepers of the Holy Lands. And we'll get to the definition of a Holy Land in just a bit. But long ago, the Anunnaki, the rulers from the planet Nibiru, planet X, once they began to develop civilization here on Earth, they needed workers. And so after they were here, according to the records, 150,000 years. Think about it. The United States is going to have a 250th anniversary in 2026 to the signing of the Declaration of Independence. 250 years. Not even a blink of an eye. When you think about a civilization that was colonizing Earth for 150,000 years. And as the records say, after that amount of time, there was a disruption, a mutiny, and a big plan came about to make the primitive worker, or the Lulu as it is called. Eventually, it succeeded, and eventually, there was hanky-panky that eventually occurred between the Anunnakis and the dwellers of Earth. We believe your biblical literatures talk about, and the sons of God found the daughters of man to be, attractive. And so they came to know them. And in the language of long ago, if you came to know someone, it means you had intercourse, sexual relationships. Language changes, there are euphemisms, there are implied meanings, and your ancestors from long ago communicated with words. Not so many could write. They communicated with words, but they were all much more psychic. So the words may have been simply a code or a small part of the communication that took place, because you don't experience that kind of communication on a regular basis. To you, it does not exist. Just like many people laugh at the idea of giants or of reptilians. Although we would say both are making a reappearance, they have to, because again, you are in the era of the return of the gods. The gods fight for control over certain locations on the planet, absolutely. Places where they have nested before. We use that with humor, but also to understand that the visitors from other planets are going to find certain areas of your planet more hospitable to them. And in general, even of long ago, it is reported that the gods walked among the people from the Greeks on backward to what was occurring. And they walk among you today, it's just that you cannot recognize them. And they don't always show their real visage, that would mean their face and their configurations, etc. So, with this return of the gods, they want to reactivate certain key areas on the planet. And long ago they established these areas called Holy Lands. Basically what these Holy Lands were, they were communication centers. We've spoken about the teraphim, the little statuettes that some were made by Abraham's father Terah, and he sold these little statuettes. They were like ancient cell phones. And some were able to have contact with the gods by way of these little teraphim. And then there were, as we've spoke recently about, the reed huts. Reed hut. And all of this is simple language, just like he came to know her. If you knew what they were talking about, you knew exactly what they meant. The reed hut was a communication center. Some of them were permanent. Many of them were portable. Many of them were the surface antenna, let us say, or the surface cell phone towers, or 5G towers that you have today, that were linking up to things in space, as these do today, and underground, as they do today. Think about it. So, the gods, after a while, when the sons of God found the daughters of women hot, in your current lingo there, and it said that they produced a race of giants. Quite fascinating. But nonetheless, makes you think about the size of the women back then and the size of the gods and all those sorts of places your minds like to meander. So after a while, as civilization developed further, these gods developed city-states, and the records indicate so much happened in Africa, particularly East Africa, South Africa. Much of it is ancient, and yet to be understood, although there's many good researchers there that are pointing out the antiquities of the remnants, particularly all over South Africa and North Africa as well. So, as they established civilization, they had to come up with a way to teach their creations and to teach them to produce food and all the keys that language, and it starts with weights and measures, and it goes on from there. And there's worships and festivals, and the lives are structured. And so in Sumer, long ago, there were various cities, and each of these cities was run by what you would call a demigod or a changeling. The Anunnaki and the gods of the hierarchy found that they had the most effect on the other humans if they mated with some human and then produced a hybrid. And we've spoken about this before. And some of these were part reptilian beings. They had the Anunnaki genes, and they lived a long time. That's another story. But these eventually became the priests, the kings, and the go-between between the worker humans, of which you have descended from, the hierarchy of those who went between the humans and the gods. Think of the pharaonic Egypt. The pharaoh operated between the whole panorama of heavenly gods and the subjects of the realm. So this is old stuff. 500,000 years at least, but it's likely much older, as records that will be uncovered or are uncovered will be indicating. So, the Holy Land was always where there was a communication center, where the priests or the king had the ability to talk to the gods. And there were technologically devices involved. Today, when you find these devices, they just may look like stone, or they may have gemstones in them. What we are getting at is that the technology that you use currently does not mimic or even symbolically represent the technology of some of these space-faring beings. One thing you do have that they have, and this is what the Ark of the Covenant is about, is nuclear capability, because the Anus brought nuclear weapons, nuclear technology to your planet. We've often said that as the nuclear issue began to be talked about from the 30s or whenever onwards, 1930s, 40s onwards, and you had your bombings of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and all manner of other kinds of things underground and secret stuff, etc. Nuclear is also a code for UFOs. Long been a code that you're saying nuclear, but you're talking about the extraterrestrials among the in-crowd of, the changelings, the demigods, those who today still operate in some capacity as go-betweens. So, the Holy Land became where the communication centers were. This is why you have far and wide around the planet a Holy of Holies. And there was an ability sometimes of technology, sometimes it was interdimensional ability, sometimes it was telepathic. But when we are talking in the Middle East, there was a whole setup of satellites, the celestial palaces, to Nibiru, to Anu, to those who lived in space and built underground and developed the surface. With the return of the gods, this appears to be in full force now, and many recognize it. It's just that it does not fit in any theology, and so it is too frightening to be able to discuss in terms of logic, just that are so big and so fantastic, other people will shut down. It's too much for them. But nonetheless, you are in the era of the return of the gods. And the gods left their records in what is today Ur-Salam. Ur-Salam was established after the Great Flood. Once the flood occurred, because of melting ice caps and the passing of Nibiru and all such things, it's a curiosity. It wasn't from carbon or too many of automobiles or anything some such, but there was a karma involved. There's always a karma involved. When you misuse energy, after a while the energy comes around to return to you, and it destroys the person who has created the destructive energy. That's why we always say, be good, do good, get good. Quite simple. Not easy to carry out all the time, but quite simple to remember. So, once these big floodings occurred, many of the Anunnaki strongholds were destroyed. Today, many of the areas that were the ancient holy lands or communication centers where someone could directly speak with the gods, this was, they're all underwater. They're in the Persian Gulf now. And there's lots of secret things going on in the Persian Gulf. Again, we've said it many times. Wherever you see war, particularly in that part of the world, war is a cover, a reason to be there, so that there's the fighting, and those who think they have to fight, to kill, and take on the same coming back to them. That's all you're going to get. But it gives an excuse for the diggers, the archaeologists, those who are after the artifacts to tunnel, to go down, to locate things. And Ur-Salam it replaced a city called Larsa, we believe, or some such, and it became mission control center for launching the rockets that the Anunnaki used to transport all kinds of things and to come and go from on Earth. And the Jerusalem, deep underground, was the center for this. The Wailing Wall today is part of an old platform of also a place for launching. Go to Lebanon and you have the gigantic, what they call Roman temple to Zeus, but it is built upon large rock monoliths that have, you couldn't even have the engineering today to trim them, to move them, to do any of it. It's ancient stonework. This is where the Masons got their connection to. The Anunnaki are master masons in the heavens, of course. And remember, Anu, the emperor of this group now, Anu is translated as heaven. Do you remember that? And even at the end, Heavan, An. See how many names you can find with An in it, or Anu. So, with the return of the gods, there's a battle, because they fight with one another, over who could reactivate and regain the records, the control, and things that were not destroyed, but they are way, way down in the entire area between Sinai, the coast, Ur-Salam, Lebanon, because the two launching places again where the rockets left and Jerusalem was mission control, Baalbek and Sinai. And then you get up into Iraq and Iran, Turkey, Syria, all kinds of things. The gods, as they return, they've come back for their toys. And yes, they are far more advanced. But you will see that some of these other holy holies may start to be, let's say, reclaimed. And of course, there's the Ark of the Covenant, one of the mysteries of ancient times that people have speculated on. But we'll get to all that. So we've set the stage a little bit, and Mr. Khan is here once again. So, Mr. Khan, welcome.
Good afternoon.
And we've laid out a little bit of a foundation, probably more than you or our vehicle expected, but that's fine. So, where do you want to go from here, Mr. Khan?
Since you've mentioned it, I did want to ask about the Ark of the Covenant.
Yes.
Well, this object was created by Moses, we're told.
Yes.
And
give Moses a location in terms of time.
This would have been, some people think it's 1500 before Christ. Some people think it would be 1200 BC. But in any case...
And Moses, remember, was found in the thrushes along the Nile, yes?
Yes.
By Pharaoh's slave or Pharaoh's daughter or some such. And Moses was raised in the Pharaonic household. Just to give people a bit of a background. All right.
Well, Moses, of course, leads the Hebrews out of bondage.
Yes. Because the Hebrews had been in bondage in Egypt for a while, and Egypt was run by, and always has been, run by the Anunnaki brother Enki. And in Egyptian, the Enki would be known as Ptah. Ptah. And Enki's son, the big troublemaker who's out and about today, is known as Ra in Egypt. When you get to Jerusalem, and that is the spaceport, that is Yahweh Enlil territory. The enemy, the brothers are enemies, remember, they fight. So Moses, the found child, raised in the Pharaonic household, and then destined to work with the slaves in the stone pits, the quarries. He liberates them after he confronts Pharaoh. Remember, he throws down his staff, yes?
Yes.
And what does it do?
Turns into a snake.
It's just good to remember when you are talking about times of ancient things when those snakes and reptiles and serpents appear out of nowhere. All right, now, so he somehow leads the Hebrews out of Israel, and he gets to the Red Sea, and he holds up that powerful staff, according to the story. And
the sea parts.
The sea parts.
And his people are led through the sea.
And then, as Pharaoh's army follows on the chariots,
then the sea no longer parts and drowns Pharaoh, or all of Pharaoh's men.
Right.
And then he leads his people, Moses does, to a mountain. And at this mountain, he receives the 10 Commandments. And it's disputed where the mountain is located. Some people think it's in Egypt. Some people think it is in Saudi Arabia. When he comes down from the mountain, there's a tremendous amount of debauchery. The Hebrews have built a golden calf.
And if we may say such, we believe he was on the mountain for 40 days.
Yes, he was receiving God's commandments, and he was there for 40 days. And for their disobedience to God, the Hebrews were forced to spend 40 years wandering in the desert before they could get to their promised land.
And just to give a little bit of a numerical review here, the Anunnaki are big on not only interpreting the cosmos and weights and measures and astrology and astronomy and mining and all of this, but they had codes. And Anu was considered to be the numerical 60. And it is reported that the orbit of Nibiru is 3,600 years. That's how long it would take it to go out into space, come in, go around your sun, or come into your solar system and move back out. Pluto, the furthest planet that is recognized, we still recognize it, takes 248 years to go around the sun. Just to give you a time comparison. For some people it's new, for others it's a bit of review. So 60 is Anu's number. 360 is the number of days the ancients always gave to Earth's evolution, or revolving around the sun, and then there were 5 null days. Now, 60 is Anu, 50 is Enlil, 40 is Enki. Just notice in certain biblical stories or scripts of ancient times how often the code of 40 comes up. It's purposeful. It means something more than the story depicts. Please continue, Mr. Khan.
Moses was instructed to build an object which we call the Ark of the Covenant.
But did he not break those tablets because he was so furious at the debauchery and the bacchanal of sex, and they were worshipping an idol is what it was, and it was the idol of the calf, and the calf, the cow, the bull, that is Taurus. But also it is interesting that Enlil, sigil, is always the bull, and Keys is the goat. Just to play with some images to get people's wheels spinning. And by the way, listeners, separate your jaw, relax your tongue. Move into relaxation, focus on your breath a little bit, and you'll get more out of what's being said, because when you do such things, you change your brainwave cycles from spinning in beta, 13 to 30 cycles per second. But you drop down a little bit from 8 to 12. You go into alpha. You're much more creative. So do it now, and then please continue, Mr. Khan. So he breaks the tablets, and then he gets instructions, very specific instructions, to build
the ark.
The ark.
It is made of a specific wood. It is covered in gold.
So before you continue, we'd like to just poke everyone's consciousness a little bit. So as you describe this ark, it's called an ark. But so was the instructions given by Enki, many believe, to Noah, or Utnapishtim, and through the Read build an ark.
Yes.
Just to show that sometimes one word can have many, many meanings. Please continue.
The 10 Commandments were carried in this ark. And
so the ark was built to hold the tablets.
Correct. There were...
Even though they were broken.
Yes. And there were a couple other objects that were held in this ark, but one of them was this substance which the people were fed with. It isn't really known what it is, but it was called manna. And it was this white substance. And I believe it would show up in the morning, but it sustained them. But some people may have heard the phrase manna from heaven.
Yes. It showed up inside the ark?
No, not inside the ark. It showed up in the morning, outside. And it was collected.
So obviously,
but there was.
It could easily be seeded and delivered from a hovering UFO. Yes,
that's possible. Yes.
I just like to get people starting to process here ancient past as the God's return.
But there was some manna that was kept in this ark, and I believe the other object was the rod of Aaron. This may well have been the same rod that was used by Moses to turn into a serpent, but I'm not sure about that.
And Aaron was one of Moses's...
Aaron was his brother.
Brother, all right.
And this ark, there's a tremendous amount of legend that surrounds it. If someone touched the ark, they would die. There's a passage in the Bible that describes people who looked in the ark being struck down by God. And this ark was also used when the Hebrews went into the promised land. They went to the city of Jericho, and they carried this ark around the city 7 times. And
they brought down the walls of Jericho.
Yes, eventually the walls of Jericho fall.
And it was a stronghold of giants, just to add a bit more juice to the story. So the 40 years of wandering in the desert, sort of punishment, but more than that, they were totally intimidated by the Canaanites and all the giants that occupied the Ursalam area, or the land of milk and honey, as it was called also, the promised land. And so, certainly, the area of Ursalam as a, quote, holy land, because it's not just a communication center, it can launch the rockets. You follow? That's the big deal. And just to give you a little bit of something else to think about, from ancient times, the shape of a missile was so embedded in the consciousness of the peoples, the creations, and it was affiliated always with the gods, because the people did not go up into the missiles. They heard la roar and boom, and they were forbidden to go into Sinai. They were forbidden to go into Baalbek. They were forbidden to go up into the cedar forests of all these areas. You read a bit about Gilgamesh and his adventures to find out what the gods were doing. But nonetheless, that shape, you find it all over the world. You find it all over China, the Forbidden City. You have these missile-like launch pads. You find it all over Asia. You find it in the stupa shapes of in Java. You find it in every small town, big city, all over Europe, all over North America. Christianity puts up their steeple, and that mimics the launch of a rocket. You have the minarets that are important to Islam. And you find this mimicking of these domes or these missile shapes or these towers. It's an ancient affiliation, older than the cross, of a presence of a power that was called God. This God is not the divine mind. The divine mind, all that is in all things, and that plays the game of existence with you, is the energy. These gods are physical beings. They are multidimensional, and they can do many, many things that you cannot do. But you will be remembering more and more as the Wowing 20s unfold. So, this ark, it was able to take down the walls of Jericho, but it also had a negative side to it. It was dangerous, yes?
Very dangerous.
And not only did the manna be produced, because of course the God that was following up above in the spaceship there, Yahweh as he's often referred to, that'll get some people's ideas rousted up there, because there's still lots of people that have a very holy belief system and image of wanting to believe that there's this magical force. And there is this magical force called divine mind, big higher consciousness with no pronouns. But when you start naming the gods, you are talking about visitors. That is across the board, friends, no matter which belief system you are in. So, please continue. You're doing well, Mr. Khan. Our audience is being refreshed, and some of them are newly educated on some of these very, very important stories that have they still have significance today.
Well, Pease, the people of Israel eventually built a temple for their God.
Temple of Solomon, yes?
Yes. And there was a place in the temple that was called the Holy of Holies.
And again, many of these places around the world they were called the center, the Holy Land, and they had the Holy of Holies. Continue.
And in the Holy of Holies.
And often the Holy of Holies was deeply embedded, very, very deep inside of a structure, not underground, but almost it was built like you would build bomb shelters. It was covered with stone, it was small, and this is where the priests supposedly met the God. Continue.
The Ark of the Covenant was kept in the Holy of Holies.
In Solomon's temple.
Yes.
And do you remember that it was many, many long years later, a few thousand years later, if you are going with this time period of 15 to 12 BC before the current era. It was in 1100 AD that the Templars came to being, and 9 French knights got a hold of some ancient writings and scripts, and they decide to ride horseback and call themselves the Knights Templar, and they took a chastity and poverty vow, and they went to Ursulam. They started the Crusades, but they were after stuff. Oh, many of those that followed, they were there for the holy, and God and all this. But once again, you create a situation, a war, fight, the Christians against the Saracens and the infidels and all the names they have. But bottom line is somebody gets into the stuff. And it was the Templars who went to Solomon's temple. And whatever they found in Solomon's temple, they brought back to Europe. And they were for 200 years a total threat to the Catholic Church. Total threat. Eventually, in 1300, Jacques de Molay, they arrested him, they burnt him on the side of the Seine, etc. A little more history here to add to the intrigue of this series that we are going to help people remember. So,
well, Peace, the Ark eventually disappeared.
It was absconded.
Some people think it disappeared in the 10th century BC. Some people believe it was the 6th century BC when the Babylonians invaded. And when the Babylonians invaded, they destroyed this temple. And it was rebuilt by King Herod, perhaps 600 years later.
So the 600 BC.
It was sometime in the 6th century BC that Nebuchadnezzar invaded.
And that's when the first temple of Solomon was destroyed.
It was destroyed.
And many think Nebuchadnezzar or his gang, they were after this because always throughout history somebody wants the artifacts.
But many people believe also that this ark was hidden under the Temple Mount or in the vast tunnel system under Jerusalem. Under
the current Temple Mount, which long ago was part of the launch area. That's why it is very sacred, because again, the Jerusalem became the place where the secrets of the gods took place. It was so holy, no one was allowed there. You follow?
Yes. Well, Pease, the Jewish people were diasporaed by the Romans in about 70 AD, I believe. But it was in the first century the Romans came in and they destroyed Jerusalem. They destroyed the temple, I believe.
So that was the second temple.
That was the second. This people has an extremely unique history because many peoples fight wars and are displaced. But in this particular case, in 1948, this state came back into existence. And
by decree, by agreement.
By decree of Lord Balfour. And
this was the
British
Balfour Agreement,
yes.
Yes,
the Balfour Declaration.
All right.
That was before 1948, I believe, but it could have been about the same time. In any case, the people of Israel is populated by many different ethnicities who came from all over the world. Many of the people that came were also Holocaust survivors. The trauma of living through and surviving an ordeal such as that would be embedded in the people. And they would see themselves as victims, and they would, it's understandable that they'd be very sensitive to any type of threat from the outside world. But, Pease, my point is that this state...
Let us add our point in here. History repeats itself. And people often incarnate onto a landmass that's deeply embedded not only in their genealogy, but also their soul. You know, some people have genealogy of wanderers. So they didn't stay put in a certain place. And some people have a soul duty when they die. Never forget, I will come back. I will hold this frequency. So when you are dealing with the mundane or corporeal existence of 3D reality, that drama has its own history, repeats itself. But there's also entrapments on the soul level where one could get caught up in loops and lines of time and then be fighting the same battles, whether it is 50, 100 years later or thousands of years later. This is... The gods see a lot of this because they live longer than you do. We call them gods because they appear to be as gods to their own creations. And they do have extreme advanced technologies, genetic engineering. Some of them have mind powers. Some of them have shape-shifting powers. They are a race in trouble, but they are very powerful. That's not to diminish the power of humankind. Because what they find about you is that you're resilient, and that you have a loyalty, for the most part, to your humanity and to one another. And that's why they have to divide you and conquer you. And this is why they create not only diversions in certain areas so someone can go, so lots of different teams going after digging the stuff. There's not just one batch that wants these artifacts. You may have war in the Middle East, and there may be 20 different groups, all using the front of war. Remember, in Baghdad, after you created the Iraq War, you built one of the biggest embassies in the world. It could be seen from space. It's simply so you could go underground and dig. So, the point is what, Mr. Khan?
Please, my point is the native inhabitants that were in this Holy Land had to be displaced in order for this new state of Israel to be created. And it almost appears that there's a...
Remember, the Hebrews were considered to be chosen,
yes,
by Yahweh Enlil.
Yes.
The important thing to know about Yahweh and Enlil, they do not love people. It is a demanding, vengeful God. The other important thing to factor into the story, however you want to interpret it, is that the God of the Piscean era, Jesus, so to speak, of which many say there's no real historical evidence as the story is told, because again, things get chopped and edited, but obviously there were some godly beings or Anunnaki part players that were happening at every juncture that you had these stories. They're not made up, but they are fantasized over the further you remove yourself from them. So Enlil has no love of any of humankind. But and he always fought with Enki, and he hated all of humankind. But he chose some people as his people because otherwise he wouldn't have any players on the game board. Do you understand? Enki ran all the players. Enlil ran heaven and transporting things into heaven that was needed in Nibiru. They had different roles. Enlil was very envious of Enki, so he wanted to destroy him. Now, so Enlil had a batch of people that he selected. He called them the chosen people because he chose them to carry out the tasks that he needed. Enlil has always wanted, Enlil is the commander of air, the commander of space, the commander of the heavens. Enki is Ea, commander of the waters and of earth. And so Jerusalem or Ursalam is key to Enlil's line to maintain control over that area until the Anunnaki could return on Enlil's behalf. Except you have the Iranian group and all that, the Muslim branch there. They are more affiliated with Enki. And the children of these ancient gods, they fight. They don't care who they destroy in the meantime. Even though they destroyed things in 2024 BCE with nuclear fights in the Middle East. They made a big mess there. They bombed things in the Sinai. They destroyed so much, fighting one another. So, to rest assured that when these people get infused, whether it is their demigods or the people who carry out their political tasks, or whether it's the gods, when they become enraged with their greed and power, it's very self-destructive. It's destructive to everything around them. But in some capacity, they have no self-control. And that is what people all over the earth are dealing with today. How much self-control do each of you have in your lives? Please continue, Mr. Khan.
Well, with the history of this state and the circumstances under which it was found, it's almost as if it is bound to always be in conflict.
Until if the waters rose from the Mediterranean all the way inland, and the same thing would happen with the Gulf, the Persian Gulf. Things were destroyed under the waters.
Well, what would it take to actually have peace in this region? Would people have to move beyond their tribalism and beyond their gods, which they currently follow? I don't see any way to avoid the conflict that we are currently seeing in that part of the world.
And this is why people pray to Divine Mind, and they pray for peace, and rather than knowing how it's going to come about, there's been many, many a time that the power of intentionality and directly speaking to the higher power, of which you all don't need a communication device for that. The communication devices are needed, and remember the Ark of the Covenant also served as a communication device. It was a radioactive type of nuclear-powered, interdimensional or Earth space-based communication device. And the thing about it, it was portable. And it was directly instructed by Yahweh and Lil to build in a certain way and to be carried about so that God could give specific instructions to Moses and Moses' siblings and children, etc. Also, it was used as a weapon. It also had other capacities. The reed huts were portable. But if you look at the pictures of the reed huts, they have wheels on them, and they have cattle around them. And so it could be by weather or whatever, things were moved not too far into position. The ark is very different. It was, people were told to stay at 1,000 meters away or some such, and anyone came too close, they were bubbled and burned, radioactivity. Again, anything radioactive and nuclear. The stories are very, very old, even in certain biblical interpretation. The glory of God, or the cherubim, or the seraphim, or the Merkabah. And if people got too close, they would be blinded or fried or toasted, or they would be baked alive. It's all radioactive energies. And the reptilian beings were more immune to it. They had this as a reptilian energy, of course, have developed this immunity to travel in space, and space is full of radioactive energy. Humans have not developed the capability of being immune to radioactive energies. All this is going to make more sense as time goes on, because you are playing now. You want to know how can this make peace? What is everyone talking about? So-and-so is going to nuke so-and-so, and mini nukes, and tactical nukes, and strategic nukes, and nukes. That's all Anunnaki talk. It's all Anunnaki wars all over again. And it was Mr. Zachariah Sitchin who said that there is a probability that history would repeat itself in 2024 current, because that was when it happened in BCE, where they had the big nuclear war, and they created the evil winds, and the Anunnaki fled the planet. And the story is that Marduk was left unharmed. And Marduk can be a very dark player. Marduk can also be a very charming player. Many, many things that you believe, people, are founded upon mosaics, small pictures, where so much has been chiseled away. And so there's a lot of missing pieces. And you have an academia and all manner of scholarly beings for thousands of years who have made things up because you lost the records. Now, with the return of the gods and the reopening of the records, and we want to add this so you can continue the story. So there's big buzz that the temple, Solomon's temple, must be rebuilt. And people are waiting for the signs for this. And it would be rebuilt in Jerusalem. Yes?
Yes.
And again, that was the place that this supreme artifact, which is the ultimate communication device, that the Hebrews had to talk to the gods. But remember, they were reed huts way before the Hebrews. You follow this?
Yes.
So it's their chosen artifact, because they were chosen by Enlil. Those people were in location. They were in Egypt. They'd been in Ur, Babylon, and all of that. They were chosen, and they were dedicated. They were willing to do sacrifice in order to meet approval of the God. That's not new. Many people were willing to do all kinds of sacrifice to win the approval, to fit in, because the gods, once again, were considered to be beyond fantastical. They launched these ships. They went into heaven, and then they came back, and they did things that were beyond the simplicity of their creations at the time. It's a lot to think about, yes?
Yes.
But in order to build the third temple, which is the big buzz now, and this is the end times, and many are sure that they're going to build the temple yesterday, and it's all prefabbed, and according to some, it won't take long. It's a month or two. They're just waiting, 3 months at the most. They're waiting for the sign that it is time. But in order to build the temple, you have to have what? The ark.
Ah.
So that's the big debate. Even if all the signs are here with the red heifer and this and all that, but you're not going to build the temple without having the ark. So this is the big debate among the community of those who are interested in these things. Who has the ark? Where is it? As you said, was it buried under the Temple Mount, which is now the big mosque, the Holy Super Mosque there? What is it called?
That's the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Al-Aqsa Mosque, yes. And so, is it buried there? Is it in Ethiopia?
Some people say it could be in Ethiopia.
Yes, yes. Or all these ruses to throw you off course. We would say that the most likely place that it would be in the vicinity of Jerusalem. Way, 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 way underground. Because it is very powerful and it is unpredictable. And the part that is left out of the biblical terms, they talk about certain clothing that had to be developed and fabric that had to be woven in certain ways. So some of the people or the priests that were allowed to go near the ark, they had to wear certain clothing. But also Moses, his brother, and others, they also had a certain number of devices of their own with crystals in them, or powerful gemstones and such that they use to protect themselves and to activate, sort of like you have a cell phone today and you dial it up and you activate a system, and it's the cell towers, and then you get the satellites and you figure out the information. This is exactly what was going on, only they were talking to what they thought was God, who appeared to be God, and gave them all kinds of powers. But these are visiting extraterrestrials of the Anunnaki family line. And they are here once again. Are you speechless, Mr. Khan?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Good. It means everyone else there's going to listen to this recording many times, and again, it's our perspective. Perspectives are perspectives, but we tend to be able to discern truth from fantasy, and we are simply giving you from our perspective, from cosmic, and studying your earth and seeing what's going on, what you're dealing with. You're dealing with tremendous change, tremendous breakdown of the belief systems. That's why many people are going bonkers, even though the astrology supports going bonkers at this time. People can't handle not just so much so fast, or too much too fast, too much data overload. Underneath, there's a part of your brain that is called the psychic radar. It's down in the back garden. We call it the potato. Potato knows. There's a part of all of you that knows months in advance, sometimes years in advance of what's coming. If the the conscious mind, knew it, you'd be paralyzed. You'd be so afraid you wouldn't leave the house. So part of you, especially if you are active with dream state and intuition, and we said that in these times that as they become more chaotic, those of you who learn how to operate the body through breath and nutrition and rest and fun and all of that, you're going to become much more psychic. This is inevitable. It's sort of a shock absorber that you have during these times. A new mechanism to cope and to deal will arise. Trust it. And it's activated in nature. It's activated around animals. It's activated around plants and the natural world. Looking at the stars. Looking at the campfire. It's activated. All right, Mr. Khan, what else do you have in that storehouse of questions?
Well, he's among the requirements that the Hebrews were following was the regular sacrifice of animals for their God. And they were given very specific instructions on making burnt offerings to their God. And they were told that God wanted certain things burned, such as the fat of an animal, or he wanted the entrails of the sacrifice washed and then burned on the altar. And he found this smell, he enjoyed the smell of this burnt offering. And I wanted to know if you could go into what exactly, what was the purpose behind this specificity of sacrifice that these people were instructed to conduct?
Well, there's different points of view. And let's say that R.A. Boulay, who wrote the book Flying Serpents and Dragons, A History of Mankind's Reptilian Past, probably published in 1991, 2, 3, something like that. He was a cryptologist for the government, and this was his hobby. And he used the books that were rejected from the Bible, the Book of Enoch, the Pseudepigrapha, the Apocrypha, all of this. And his interpretation was that it was the altar. He said it was more like a barbecue grill, and that he felt that this was food for the gods, that the gods were instructing that their food be prepared in a specific way. And if you do remember, the God of the Hebrews has very, very specific how to eat, what to eat, when to eat, etc. More so than any other group on the planet. Right?
Yeah.
So, Boulay felt it was having to do with the way their food, they would want it prepared. Remember, these gods were not human. They could appear as human. They were not human. So this Mr. Biglino, excellent linguist, obviously well studied, as he broke down the meaning of the ancient writings, he saw that that the specific way of prepping things created a smoke, and his interpretation was the aroma or the smoke calmed the Elohim or the gods down. There's still more to the story. It's, in some capacity, as we see it, we said that these gods, in their cosmic form, they are reptilian. And there are many cultures around the world who know that the gods were reptilian. The Greeks knew, they called them the ugly ones. They had a name for them, we forget the name, but they were called the ugly ones. And they lived on the island of Ceylon, old Sri Lanka, and the Chinese traded with them, or not the Chinese, the Indian people from the Indian country, their subcontinent, traded with them, and they knew that these beings would not show their face. They left their goods on shore, and they hid from the people. And they were always called the ugly ones, the grotesque ones, the monsters. And so in some capacity, as we see one of the aspects of why this was so important to be done in a certain way, it helped them shift out of their reptilian form into a human form. Strange as it may seem. So there are also stories that people have spoken of in modern times where the smell of human blood would break the trance of a extraterrestrial reptilian, and they would lose their human form and their reptilian form would come through. There's truths to all of this, but it is a very, very frightening subject to go into. And these reptilian gods, of which there were many, and the many subsidiaries, and this reptilian race exists in the cosmos. It's not just on Nibiru. It's many, many places. And there are many versions of it. There are the workers, there are the overlords, they are the high ones. The high ones are often called the white dragons. And then they're the warring Anunnaki. So they're not just talking about the reptilians of the Anunnaki line. As we discover more and talk more about the Holy Land, and as the gods start to show themselves in human or other forms, whether they come in ships or shape-shifting or more and more of this reptilian story appears, you are living in the time of return of the gods. Many people will have difficulty in integrating this. Many people will see what they want to see. They will project their own holiness, their own beliefs on things. And right now, as you know, all over the world, there is a depopulation plan that's in full effect. This ought to come as no surprise to our listeners, whether it is the electromagnetic radioactive frequencies from your cell phones, that now they want to squash all that kind of research, and because there's too much money involved, whether it is mind control from these deadly devices, whether it is the obesity. It's going to take some supernatural, paranormal, natural type of divine blessing that may bring everyone to their knees in awe, in gratitude, and humility. Because as a people, you're unraveling. People in Europe are very unhappy. The people in the United Kingdom, in Great Britain, all of that, they're very unhappy. Canadian people are very unhappy. Everyone feels as if their rights are taken away, and there's more and more lies being told to them. So, it's a period you're going through. There is an end to it, which is the wowing 20s. It has to unfold. We remind you, every thought you have has an impact, a power. Right now you are you have to choose where you want to put your energy, who you want to affiliate with. Avoid being emotionally passionate about things that you can do nothing about. If you are really that excited about something, do it in your mind, set the energy, write it out, draw it out. If you want peace somewhere, get out a map and do some drawings and put peace there and put a nice crystal there or a bouquet of flowers. Every act you extend will have the power to impact things. So this is our final message to you that for today is that you don't have to know how things will happen, but you do have to know what you want. Personally, locally, globally, and where you see things going for humankind. The Anunnaki are very screwed up, and there are some good forces among them, but the help that you are going to need may come from unexpected corners, unexpected areas. So do your best to be uplifted. Do your best to have a look-forward attitude. In the Northern Hemisphere, you are still in spring. In the Southern Hemisphere, you are in autumn. Enjoy it. Create the best, dear friends. And once again, Mr. Khan, it's always a pleasure to explore the highways and byways of existence and all manner of consideration. And we trust that our listening audience all around the world learns a lot from our discussion. So thank you, Mr. Khan. And out there in listening land, in mystery land, thank you, all of you who are willing to look at things from a much, much, much bigger picture and to still live a rich and ordinary life. You are a tribute to your species, humankind. Thank you, friends, for your attention to these matters. Best of creations and pleasant journeys. Good evening.
Good evening.